Hey, Warrior Saints, Father Chris here, and welcome to today's version of our COVID live stream. Glad to have you with us. Let's start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. O Heavenly King, Comforter, the Spirit of truth, who art in all places, and fillest all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and dwell in us, cleanse us from every stain, and save our souls, O gracious Lord. Amen. Glad to have you in. Decided to go au natural today. What do you think? What do you think of these babies? Look at that stuff. I haven't had a haircut in a long time. The question I want to pose to you as I let it grow. My wife hates it. My girls don't really love it. I kind of think it's fun. I never knew my hair was that curly. So I want to ask you guys the question today. You can vote in the comment section. Just tell us what you think. Should I stop the grow or should I let them flow? You tell me. You decide. I will do whatever you lead me to. With that being said, I let them flow today after my run because and shower and all that stuff because it made me think of what I was just doing this last week. So this past week I was in California with family, and we stayed with my in-laws in their home, and where they live, right down the street from their house, there is a huge park. And, you know, the whole town seems to do their exercise, their run around the park. And so every day I would go down there and run. And California is my home. I was raised there. In Los Angeles, we were in San Diego, but it's California. And, you know, Southern California has kind of collectively of one mind. There's a definite mentality to Southern California. And so I noticed it was a very different place than where I was raised. It's not quite the same. I mean, no place is. Everything changes, but it was fascinating, and I want to share with you some of the observations. So each day that I was there, I did my run, and as I noticed on the first run around this huge park area, that as I crossed paths with people, all of their heads were cocked down, like they were looking towards the floor. Part of that may just be, you know, looking out where you're going. Part of that, honestly, may be the cell phone neck. I mean, we all kind of have that cell phone neck. I was even like trying to stretch out and notice I was looking down too. Maybe it's cell phone neck. But it seemed a little bit funny because there was no ability nobody could make eye contact with me as I ran by. It struck me as funny. So the second day, as I was doing my run, I said, well, let's experiment a little bit. Let's see what's going on here. And so I started to mess with people in the sense that every time I would cross paths with someone, or if I would pass someone or someone would pass me in the run, I would wave. Hi, how are you? I'd point, you know, like, and nod my head. Some type of interaction, some type of like connection with another human being, because all their eyes were focused down. And what really was funny about it was that they were startled. Like every one of them was startled as if what, we talk to people? I mean, don't you know, we have to stay away from one another somehow. And this it didn't strike me as a COVID distance. It was a connection distance. And so I decided on the third day to get even a little snarkier as I was running around in town doing some errands. You know, this particular city, San Diego, that area, you know, it's a left-leaning city. And so I decided, you know, I can't help myself sometimes. I'll be a snark. And I would just make, you know, comments about MAGA or President Trump or the local politicians in the area. Not that I even care or were interested in them, but what was fascinating to me was the visceral and immediate response that people had. So if I said something that they agreed with, it was like, yeah. And if I said something that they didn't agree with, it was automated. I think Greg and I were talking earlier today. He used a great phrase, autopilot. It just came out. And what was fascinating to me was not only the inability to connect with the eye contact, the ability to say hello to other people, but this immediate and pre-programmed response that anyone would say based on what anyone else said to them. Now, I don't really care what your political leanings are. This was just me being snarky in an experiment. You can believe whatever you want. And thank God in this beautiful country we have the right to do that. But what really struck me the most was, like I said, the autopilot response that just came flying out. And I thought, well, gosh, these people are like automata. Like, I will say these words because these are the words that I'm supposed to say. And I was kind of saddened by it. It made me wonder, how much are people really thinking anymore, right? Like, again, Greg and I were having a great conversation this morning, And like, I asked the question, I'm wrestling with these ideas in my mind. Is everything political, or are we politicizing everything? Either way, politics is the conversation du jour, and there's this side and this side, and we tend to default, like if I find myself on this side, I default into this. And if I default onto, or if I fall on this side, I tend to default into these positions. And we find ourselves watching our favorite talking heads. The conservatives have the Ben Shapiro type, and the liberals have the CNN Chris Cuomo, right? Chris Cuomo type. Like these ideas, these voices, these talking heads, and they give us like speaking points and bullet points that we respond. Like those people, those automata when I was in California, where if somebody says X and it doesn't fall in your category, you respond immediately and unfortunately viscerally to this to the statement with your pre-programmed, packaged, canned answers. And I was like stunned by it all, because I thought, where the heck is thought? I mean, where are we thinking? And I'm going to go into this a little bit, like why that's so important, and how we know that we're losing the ability to think, or at least the willingness to think. It's fun. We were talking again, Greg. I'm looking at you now in the camera. We've been having some great conversations, because we're really wrestling to try to figure out, like, as leaders, as warrior saints, we have to lead and set the tone, set the charge, and not just be consumed with all things political. And, there was this great band. I used to love them. I listened to them all the time. I still do, as a matter of fact, called Rage Against the Machine. And in 1992, I think they're out there. One of all their albums, my favorite of their albums, came out in 1992, and they were very politically outspoken. And there was one song called Bullet in the Head. Now, tough title. It's a rough topic, but I was thinking, reflecting on that song, the statement that he was making. Let me grab this. Sorry. The statement that he was making was, you sit in front of your TV and you receive everything that they feed you. So, like, in other words, the constant media bombardment. Now, keep in mind, this is 92, right? This is almost 30 years ago. The constant media bombardment is like a bullet in your head, and you've stopped thinking. And he says, the lyrics say things like, you jump when they say how high, you buy the things that they want you to buy. You are, in some sense, and he said it in the lyrics, you're a slave to what he called an in-home drive-by. So, like he's using the metaphor of a drive-by shooting, and it's in-home watching your TV. I'm going to say that today, we've gone even a step further, and we don't really participate in an in-home drive-by. We participate in a cell phone drive-by, and we carry it with us everywhere we go. And if you're like me, you've had those freaky moments where you've mentioned a word, and it pops up in your Facebook feed or your social media feed or on your Google app, your Google search bar. It's like, oh, like, are they listening and so on, and just giving us and feeding us the data that we want to hear, and not really thinking about it. I personally think, yes, that's happening. And then it brings back to mind the talking heads, the political pundits, the Shapiro, Cuomo, and all the rest of those types of personalities, and the things that they're saying. And here's where we've come to in the thought. It's like, and then we're going to ask the question, all right, so as warrior saints, how do we get away from it? What role do we have to play in it? I think the first thing that we have to recognize is where we've come to is perhaps an impasse, a place where thought it's gone, right? We don't spend a lot of time thinking and wrestling with ideas. And you can see how that happens. I mean, first, like, again, quoting a conversation from Greg and I earlier this morning. Gee, you're all over the place. We should have had you on with us today. I'm sorry. He made a great statement. He's like, look, I believe in equality for all people, but I also don't believe that we should bomb a federal courthouse. Thinking about Portland, right? Like, the protest, it's for equality of all people, and if there is inequality, we should fight for there to be equality. That's the foundation of American law. I mean, our Constitution, especially with 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, made all men equal. I mean, and if it's not, we should fight for that. But but I also don't think we should be blowing up buildings, right? And protests are different than riots and destruction and violence. And so he was asking the question, like, can I think both? Can I pick something that I like from the left and something that I like from the right? And it seems like the answer should be absolutely yes, of course. I mean, of course, you have to pick truth. But really, the question we're asking is, do we? I mean, do we do that? Like, do we tend to default into, have we become victims of the cell phone drive-by and become slaves to our, our mentality or the positions that we hold? And I think that's really what we're struggling with. And I don't mean me and Greg, I mean all of us as a nation, we're struggling with, like, if my team says this, I have to go all in with this, right? Do you see it? And I know you feel that pressure. Some people may say, no, I don't. I'm free to say whatever I want. But you know what? We're kept in check now, right? Like, if you don't say the right things, there is something we call the gotcha culture, or you may know it as the cancel culture, where if you don't say the right things, we are squashed, and people have lost their jobs and their reputation and their name. There's been a lot of stuff. People have really suffered from this kind of stuff. I mean, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually. Because we are being forced in some way into sides, and we're not thinking. And leaders, which is what warrior saints are called to be, to lead the charge. We are to be examples, right? Christ tells us in Matthew chapter 5, you are the light of the world. You don't put a light in a room and hide it under a bushel. A city on top of a hill can't be hidden. I mean, we are called to be the light of the world, to let them see our works and give glory to our Father in heaven. We are called to be those lights. And as leaders, we have to think. We're taking what I see we're doing a lot of, and I'm picking on you, but I'm picking on me too, is, look, we have taken our instruction and our research from memes, right? You know what a meme is? A meme, an internet meme, where it's like a photo or a text, usually a funny or a pointed little quip. I'm going to put this meme up here. I want you to see this meme. And this is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with. Look at this picture and take a moment and look at it. I'm going to look at it with you. So here's the problem, right? I mean, as we take that down, I mean, as you can see it, like, that was just some person, don't know who the person was, who made this meme and made this statement that said, this person in 2012 had closed door meetings with Joe Biden and whatever, went after attacking Joe Biden. And now, look, you don't have to be honest with me. I already know the answer, but you do need to be honest with yourself. How many of us have found and looked at one of those memes and then just because if it says what I think on my side, and turned around and spewed it back to people, regurgitated it as a research and a defensible position against your enemy, only to say, I don't really check and see if any of that's true, right? And like, if you looked at the first half of this meme, and then of course in bold, stay aware. I mean, the author of this meme is trying to set you up. You don't read the bottom half of the meme. And he says, I just flat out made it up. Like, none of that's true. So whatever that meme said was then corrected in the same meme. It's not true. And what's funny is where we found it, someone posted it to prove their point. Like, they didn't even read the full meme. They saw a couple of words of it, took it, put it on their Facebook page as a definitive proof, and got hammered for it, because they were like, everyone was like, hello, did you read the whole thing? It's a joke. It was made up. But how many of us do that? I mean, I think you all know the answer is all of us, right? I mean, every single one of us has been guilty. Or if we don't want to generalize, 99% of us are guilty of doing that very thing, which it can be fun. But how do you know that that information is true? I mean, in this case, it was false. It was a joke. It was made up. So how many of us do that? How many of us go to our talking heads or to our favorite news outlet and see an article and look, pay close attention to your news media too. I mean, look at the articles, the titles. It's all clickbait. It cracks me up. They're the same as the advertisements at the bottom of each page. Like the language is the same. It's clickbait, tricking you into reading or thinking whatever they may be wanting you to think. How many of you check? How many of you think? How many reason and actually look at fact and say, it works here, it doesn't work here? I mean, this is what we're looking for. This is what we're striving for. Let me talk about leadership again. Look, we need to lead the charge. We're called to be the light of the world, son. Come on, let's do it. And to do that, we have to lead. To be effective leaders, we have to think, right? Like, we are working so hard in this whole, I mean, like, it's coming. We're going to bring you a series. Greg, we talked about it again yesterday. I don't really know the exact date, but hopefully by next week, we will be launching a new series called Crucifixional Leadership. It is about how to lead, right? It's going to be a part of the Way of the Warrior Saint, which we want to encourage everyone to see. It's going to teach us how to lead. And one of the main lessons, in fact, early on in the whole series, is thinking. How to think, not what to think, how to think, so that you can process in your own mind your own beliefs and your own opinions. To think is, in truth, to set us free from the slavery of all of the stuff that contributes to the cell phone drive-by, right? Like, in other words, look, I don't need to see your comments. You're welcome to post whatever you want. Most importantly, stop the grow or let them flow. But if you want to comment, do it. But I would appreciate it really if you don't put that, Father Chris, you need to this, and and throw your left Democratic opinions or your right Republican opinions at me. I'm not interested in that stuff. Like, you have the right to believe what you want to believe, but you have to be honest enough with yourself to say, I'm a victim of the algorithms. Right? If I click something conservative, you better believe you're going to see more conservative stuff in your feed. And if you click something liberal, you're going to see more liberal stuff in your feed. That's just how it works, which makes you wonder, is it any of it real in the first place? That's another conversation, huh, Greg? Maybe we should have that one day. Is any of it real in the first place? But when we accept it, we're not thinking. And Christ does not want us to be slaves. He wants us to be free. All right, and so when we talk about slaves and free, I'm not talking about in the sense of, early 19th century United States with slavery. That's certainly a part of it, but he's talking about slavery of the mind and slavery to corruption, which it's all a part of it. But in Galatians, let me set it up a little bit. You're going to see, we're going to pop this verse on the screen in a moment, just a moment. Galatians is St. Paul's defense. It's his teaching of and defense of the gospel. And one of the things that he is struggling with is that people, Jewish Christians, were trying to make Gentile Christians slaves to the law of Moses. So what he was saying was, you have to first become a Jew in order to become a Christian. And to do that, you have to be circumcised and you have to follow all the law of Moses. St. Paul's argument is, no, you don't. Nobody can be righteous by following the laws of Moses, that it depends upon our faith, our belief, our commitment, our trust in God, and being baptized and living that way. And so even in Galatians, he forbids circumcision because he's trying to set them free from the slavery of the law of Moses. Not saying we don't use the law of Moses. Of course we do. For heaven's sakes, the 10 Commandments are all legit, right? But to say that that's not how we find righteousness, and he's coming to set them free from this slavery, and that that freedom is given to them in Christ because they are thinking now, right? And listen to this verse. You're going to see it on your screen. Chapter 5, verse 1. For freedom, Christ has set us free. So he set us free for the sake of freedom, the freedom of thought, of mind, of decision. That's what he's talking about. It's not about running around in chains or not in chains, right? Like, so at the time of the writing of these epistles, in the Roman Empire, at the time of Christ, everybody was a slave in the Roman Empire. There were very few free people. Slavery was something that they all understood and dealt with. And it's something that he was not referring to specifically in Galatians 5. He's talking about freedom, but that requires that you think, right? Brothers and sisters, you got to think. For freedom, Christ set us free from that yoke, the yoke of the law of Moses. And then he says, stand fast, therefore, stay strong. I mean, don't waver on this. Do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. And so what I'm piggybacking off of St. Paul's verse is to take that statement and throw it at us today and say, don't go back to the slavery. Don't go back to the cell phone drive-by. Don't go back to mindless acceptance of memes as gospel truth. Think. It's a virtue, thinking. I don't know, is it a virtue? It's an action. What do you want to call it, Greg? But it's a virtue. Let's just go with that. It is a virtue that has become so few and far between in today's world, right? It is so few and far between. You're going to throw this one on the screen. Become like this guy, right? I think they call him the thinker. I mean, become like this guy. You can see he's pondering his thinking. It's just fun. We're talking about thinking. Had to throw him up there. But it's a statement to us that to become leaders, to really lead the charge and to become the lights in the world that Christ has asked us. Look, guys, I'm just telling you, you've got to think. And there are a few steps that are involved in this. It is not okay. It just is not okay if we just accept everything as gospel truth without at least verifying it. As we saw earlier in that made up meme that we put up there, that joke meme, I mean, like, you don't have any idea who wrote the meme and what they're saying and if it's true and if their statistics are true, right? Like, you can't trust all of that. Do you understand? So here's what I want you to do, a couple of steps, and then we'll be done for today, but I think they're important about thinking. Is one, watch for yourself. Watch for yourself. So President Trump is a great example for this because he is always in the news and every news source covers every single thing that he says. What I'd like you to try, see if you can do this, because you know that if he gives a speech or a press conference, Fox News will praise it and CNN will smash it, right? So depending on which one of those you read, you're going to think he was terrible or he was great. What I would say to you is, you know what? Why don't you watch it for yourself and see what you think, right? You may agree with CNN or Fox, but at least now you've actually seen the footage, the full footage, right? Not just a snippet that they edit for you. That's another one, Greg. Write that down. We're going to talk about editing, right? I know you found something great for that. Not just a snippet that they put together, right? Like, here's a great one. Forgive me, CNN fans. I'm going to call them out here because it was the funniest thing. It hit me hard. A few years ago when President Trump went to Japan and he was with President Abe, Shinzo Abe of Japan, and one of their customs is they have a koi pond and the Japanese president feeds the koi pond, feeds the koi fish. And they came out with these little buckets, little wooden baskets, and they had spoons, and you see Abe dump a spoon in for the fish, and then President Trump dumps in a spoon for the fish, and then Abe dumps in a spoon for the fish, and then Trump follows. And then CNN's footage shows Trump emptying the basket, all of the food into the koi pond. And CNN like lambasted him, like how he doesn't have any, what am I looking for? Class, basically. He's just, you know, a hack as a, what's the word I'm looking for? Come on, Greg, when you have foreign relations. He's got no relations, you know, foreign relations skills, none of that kind of stuff. And how terrible. Well, Fox saw that and called him out on it, and they ran the full clip. And what you see in the full clip was Abe throw a spoon, Trump throw a spoon. Abe throw a spoon, Trump throw a spoon. Abe dump his bucket, and you see President Trump look at him and say, oh, and then he dumps his bucket. Now, I'm not picking on CNN except to say this was an actual thing that happened, but when I saw that full clip, I was like, oh, they edited it. So you can see, and that stuff happens on all sides. So go with the idea that you are being manipulated if you don't see the full thing, because they're going to tell you a story the way they want you to see it. So that's a long ramble, but read the full text, watch the full video, make up your own mind. Now, connected to that, I think it's also important, and we've talked about this before, if you're a Fox guy, you better read CNN too. You better. And if you're a CNN gal, you better read Fox also. I mean, it is important to see both sides, both perspectives. I read as much of them as I can. I mean, my day is pretty regimented. I don't allow tons of time to spend on the internet, you know, surfing around all those articles. But I try, if I'm going to read this, I want to read that too, because I want to see all the perspectives. And interesting, try this part of it. If you're going to read an article on a Fox Breitbart about situation X, make sure you find the same story, situation X, on a CNN or Atlantic or Vox type of left-leaning newspaper. Do you understand? Don't read different stories to get a perspective. Read the same story. How are they telling the same story? You're going to find, if your heart is open and your mind is open and you can think, you're going to find that, they're both kind of losers, and they both tell me some good stuff. So, like, you know, there's a little bit of good and a little bit of bad in both. So number two, make sure you read both sides. And number three, And this one is the hardest. We're going to spend a lot of time in our Way of the Warrior Saint series called Crucifixional Leadership about this very specific topic that I'm about, or practical point that I'm going to throw out. But it is you have to fight through the emotion and use your brain, right? Because all of this stuff, one of the reasons I think that everything is so political right now, that everything is being politicized, is because even things that are traditionally church topics that belong to the church have become political, because everything is becoming political, because it feeds on emotion. You know that old saying, they said, don't ever talk about politics or religion. Why not? Because they spur emotion and people get angry and you fight. And look, when you are, whatever your side you're on, when you start to read and listen and hear stuff, you get emotional. And we have to fight that emotion. Emotion is beautiful. It is what makes a human being a human being. But when we're trying to think, emotion can very easily cloud our decisions, cloud our judgment, and cloud our thought. And so the challenge is not to remove emotion, but to set it aside so that we can see and think clearly. There are a lot of ways to do that. We will talk about them on this series. But if we can set the emotion aside and set this is what I want, this is what my team says, this is what I believe, and set it aside and actually at least try to look objectively at fact and see what actually is going on and happening, you might make some progress. And you might say, I can see what's happening. I can see all of the chaos that's out there in the world. So try those three things. I mean, if you can pull them off, you're probably a better man or woman than I am. I'm sure you are. But make sure you read the whole story or watch the full clip. Look at different angles of the same story and see if you can set your emotion aside. This will lead you towards thought. Sorry, let me add a bonus one, a fourth. And this is probably the worst thing that we need to conquer ourselves, is listen to this. You better have time to think. You've got to set aside time to think. And let me say something to you. You have to put that in your calendar, right? So I'm going to show you. Here is my calendar. Let me get there. If you do not budget your time, if you do not schedule it, you are not going to get it. Now, I don't know if this is going to pop up. Can you see this? It's not going to show. Anyways, can you see it, Greg, or no? Okay, so this is my phone with my calendar. And this is my day, a typical day. In the morning, I wake up. You can? Okay, so I'm just going to read to you. This was Tuesday. I'm sorry. I can't do it. Old geezer. Tuesday, July 21, 6 a.m. Prayer, coffee, and prayer and coffee. Sorry, prayer and coffee. 7 a.m. Exercise. 9 o'clock, write for the Way of the Warrior Saint. 11 a.m. Teach and film. 2 p.m. Prepare for your sermon. 4 p.m. Listen, this is the title of my 4 o'clock appointment. Learn/think. So I have an appointment, and it recurs in my calendar to spend time to think. And you know what I do? I sit outside on my patio, I light my daily cigar, and I think. No TV, no cell phone. I have budgeted and planned time to think. This is perhaps, now I'm really off topic and really rambling long, but I mean, it's important, guys, and I love you, which is why I'm saying these things to you. You have to make the time. Do not think that, well, I'm going to go through about the day and do all the things that I have to do, and when time, eases up, I'm going to be able to think. Nuh-uh. It ain't going to happen. It does not happen. The world will not give you time to do nothing that you can spend in thought. You have to budget it. Write it down. So that last point is make sure you find the time, make the time to think. All right. Love you. I don't know. Stop the grow, let them flow. You guys tell me. You decide. I don't know. We'll see. It's fun. It's hot. It really is hot. In Arizona, it's like 115, so it's hot. But it's been fun. I want to thank you all. Make sure you visit us at warriorsaints.org and sign up for the Way of the Warrior Saint. You know what it is already. You all have heard this. It is our online library where we are teaching. We've got a powerful, awesome, kick butt new series coming out. It will hopefully launch next week. It's called Crucifixional Leadership. How do we lead? All you need to do, subscribe. Visit us at warriorsaints.org. Use the promo code. Pop it on your screen. You will get 30% off. It makes it $20 a month. I mean, come on. Like, you spend more than that each week in coffee and lattes. get on the way of the Warrior Saint. A lot of people have been saying that we watch it on our lunch break. I mean, most of the vids are like 15 minutes, and they're fun. The team does a really good job, so they're fun. Join us. Visit wayofthewarriorsaint.org. We will, hopefully, tomorrow's Wednesday. We typically teach in the evening on Wednesday, but because Wednesday is also the eve of the feast of the Transfiguration of Christ, we will celebrate Divine Liturgy at 6:30 p.m. So we encourage you, join us at 6:30 p.m. Pacific for Divine Liturgy, for the Feast of our Lord's Transfiguration. Thursday morning, we'll be back here, right here again at 11. And until then, keep walking on the way of the Warrior Saint.